All of the surveys that we've seen, Senator, show that the number one issue on the minds of voters in Maine is the cost of living. People are struggling financially. Obviously, inflation took a serious toll. To some extent, that horse has left the barn and been brought back. Inflation is a lot lower than it was, but people continue to have trouble making ends meet. My question, what specifically can the federal government do to help people who are struggling with the high cost of living?
Well, I think the first thing to observe, Rob, is we see the figures that inflation is down, but the inflation that we've had over the past 3 or 4 years is baked into prices. So it's about 20% higher than it was pre-pandemic. That's what we've got to tackle. What can the federal government do? One of the mistakes I think the federal government has made over the past 30 years is taking its foot off the gas and enforcing the antitrust laws. For example, there are only 4 companies in this country that control 85% of the market for meat. That's a recipe for higher prices. Competition is the best way to control prices, and in fact, we're seeing it on TV as costs for cellular phones, for example. They're all competing and talking about $25 a line, $20 a line. That's competition. That's one of the things the federal government can do. The other thing that we can do is be sure that supply chain problems like container ships backed up at Long Beach, California, that ripple out through the economy is something also that we can tackle. And energy costs too, which is I'm sure something we're going to talk about. Energy costs is underneath a lot of these higher costs for everything.
Republican Demi Kouzounas, same question. What can the federal government do specifically to address the high cost of living?
Stop spending. I mean, what we've done is we went ahead and had American Rescue Plan, which was COVID-2 plan, which threw trillions of dollars in. Then we had the infrastructure bill, another couple of $1 trillion, and then of course we had the Inflation Reduction Act. And all of those things basically heated up the market and threw a lot of money in the pockets. People started spending, and you had inflation. And inflation doesn't go away. You just lower the rate of the rise, which is what's happening now, where hopefully this year maybe closer to 3%. We're about 2.5 now so far. So that is an issue. And it's not just about phones. We have a problem with eggs, bread, gas, oil, heating oil. These are staples that people have to pay every day to basically make it in the state of Maine. And so we have to stop spending.
All right.
And that's going to be an issue that we have to deal with.
David Costello.
Just a couple of quick things. I certainly agree with what Senator King said about antitrust laws. We certainly have to apply them more effectively. I also think in terms of the supply chain, I disagree a bit with Demi in that it really wasn't, it was the supply chain, it's the pandemic that really led to the 20% boost or over the cumulative boost in inflation. And I think what the federal government can do and needs to focus on is what kind of relief do you provide? As you've said, Rob, the Fed has done its work. The rate of inflation is down below 3%. Now we need to make sure that those families struggling have enough assistance, whether that's through child care tax credits. I think we need to expand those. We need to look at the earned income tax credit, provide more resources there. Certainly as it relates to energy costs, whether it's electricity or home heating oil, we need to do more with regard to LIHEAP, the low income energy assistance programs. Also, we need to look at wages. Wages haven't kept up, so I certainly think we need to look at the increase of the federal minimum wage, to raise that up to at least $14 or $15 an hour to keep up with inflation. And certainly looking at Social Security, we need to expand benefits and raise not only the cap on the payroll tax, but also to raise more revenue to protect Social Security. But also we need to take a look at the COLA.
All right, I want to jump in because I want to keep things moving along. Jason Cherry, same question.
I think a lot of news is out there about dynamic pricing, and that happens in a closed market. And so David and Senator King and myself are looking at more competition for living costs. And for here in Maine specifically, what can be done is we need to take advantage of what our location is at. We are up in the Northeast. We're isolated. Transportation costs here are very expensive. I used to live in DC, and the food's more expensive here going out than DC at a certain point. So that means that stronger ties with international trade. I have a background in international trade and business. We need to work more with our Canadian partners to make sure that we have more competitive goods. We need more competitive fuel oil here. It's very costly. It's about $1,000 sometimes for some families, and I don't know how they can make it. So
Okay.
between that,
I want to let that be the last
Okay.
point because we do want to move on. One of the ways in which the government is constrained in dealing with problems is that the government is already spending so much money. It takes in about 75 cents for every dollar it spends. The result, an enormous budget deficit, about $1.7 trillion this year, something like that. You said a moment ago, Demi Kouzounas, that we need to stop spending. So let me ask, in dealing with the budget deficit, there are basically two options: increasing taxes or reining in spending. Which would you do, and give me specifics?
Well, first of all, 1.7 trillion is what we're paying on the interest on the deficit. The deficit is close to $36 trillion. GDP.
Well, that's the debt. The debt is 36 trillion. The deficit is about 1.7 trillion.
Okay. I'm going to tell you that if we took all the people in all the United States and put them all together, we don't have $36 trillion. And so we have a problem where all the taxing in the world would not save this problem. We have an issue here. What we have to do is not continue spending like we've been spending, and then we have to also be able to find ways, which personally I would say is bring more manufacturing back in the state, increase workforce, and bring more money into the state. Right now, we're a consumer society, and that is causing havoc for our deficit.
Let me come back to spending. Are there places where you specifically would cut? And if so, what are those programs?
Well, there's nothing to cut. We shouldn't be spending any more money. We shouldn't put new bills out there and continue spending and putting money out there. We're already spending too much. Our GDP is not equal to the $36 trillion that we have in the hole at this point. So we need to just take a look at things, be more strategic. The two things that are more expensive right now we're paying for is Social Security and Medicare. We are now spending more than we are on the deficit than we are on military defense. So we've got problems, and we need to really take a look at this. Otherwise, our children and grandchildren will be taking care of this problem for us.
All right, David Costello, same question. How would you address the federal budget deficit?
Well, the last time we had a surplus was during the Clinton years. And so what happened after that, we had a couple of massive tax cuts during George W. Bush's administration and certainly during Mr. Trump's administration. We need to roll back most of those taxes, quite frankly. If we do that, we'll start to raise the revenue. The wealthy in this country have had a tremendous ride, quite frankly, as it relates to taxes, and also the economy for them is very good right now. And actually, I've done all right because I started investing in the market in 1991, but most Americans haven't. So what we need to do, again, we need to be smarter with the budget. We need to be smarter with spending.
Okay, but what are the specifics? Again, where would
I would
tax
not cut.
spending, or where would you raise taxes?
Where I would raise taxes, I certainly think we need to make the tax, so as it relates to the corporate tax, go from 21 back up to 28. Also, we need to go back to 40%, 39 to 40% for those higher income levels for more progressive income tax. I certainly believe we should do a wealth tax above those who make more than $1 million a year. So there are a number of other taxes we could do in terms of Social Security. I talked about the payroll tax. At least those, again, eliminate the cap altogether. Right now it's $168,000. So those are examples of taxes that were revenue that we could raise and raise a significant amount if we make those changes.
All right, Jason Cherry, same question.
Well, I agree with me. I was a assistant section chief for 430 employees and a budget of over $100 million. So I saw plenty of expenditures that were way beyond what a normal business would spend. So part of the problem is I think the federal government's drunk off of tax money. And the first thing for an AA is to admit you've got a problem. So we could raise as much money as possible, but we're still going to misspend it. So where do we get it? I pay 34% tax bracket, the highest you can. Maybe that's me, but I have no shenanigans, and maybe I'm just dumb to be so. But when you have someone like Jeff Bezos or someone else that are declaring $80,000 in tax and income, and they pay less income tax than me, that is an outrage to the upper middle class and the middle class. We're looking at an elitist that have gone from 8% of the GDP in the 1980s to 30% by some.
All right, I want to jump in, and that same question, we finish with Senator Angus King.
I had lunch 4 or 5 years ago with one of the budget officials, a nonpartisan budget official. He said, you know, Senator, if we collected all the taxes that people are cheating on, it would cut the deficit in half. So that's the first step, is to go after people who are cheating, the millionaires and billionaires. This isn't tax avoidance, this is downright cheating, not even filing. We started to do that under the Inflation Reduction Act. Already several $1 billion has been collected under that program. So that's number one. Number two, corporations, there are billion-dollar corporations that are paying no taxes because of a series of deductions. Again, in the Inflation Reduction Act, we passed a law that says an alternative minimum tax for corporations making more than $1 billion in profits. So that's one place to go for revenues. The other thing, what's really driving the federal deficit isn't the Agriculture Department or the Interior Department or the National Parks or even the Defense Department. What's driving it is healthcare costs. And that's where I think we really need to talk again about refocusing Medicare on prevention rather than simply treating. Instead of doing $50,000 for a broken hip, how about giving people grab bars for their showers so that we can avoid that broken hip and that $50,000 expenditure?